US underlying inflation picked up along with consumer spending as the third quarter drew to a close. Government figures showed ahead of the Federal Reserve's penultimate policy meeting of the year. Consumer price growth also gathered pace in Tokyo, an indicator of nationwide inflation. Bank of Japan officials also meet next week, as do Bank of England policymakers. In the UK, fresh data showed employment declined for a third month. Meantime, Israel's central bank reduced growth estimates for this year and 2024 as the nation's war with Hamas restrains activity. The Fed's preferred measure of underlying inflation accelerated to a 4-month high in September, and consumer spending picked up, keeping the door open to another interest rate hike in the months ahead. The core personal consumption expenditures price index, which strips out the volatile food and energy components, rose 0.3%, while inflation-adjusted household outlays rose 0.4%. The US economy grew at the fastest pace in nearly 2 years last quarter on a burst of consumer spending, which will be tested in coming months. Gross domestic product accelerated to a 4.9% annualized rate, more than double the second quarter pace, according to the government's preliminary estimate. In a year when the US economy exceeded almost everybody's expectations, the underlying federal deficit roughly doubled, spotlighting a dire fiscal trajectory, likely to only worsen the partisan budget battles in Washington. It also helps explain why yields on longer-term US Treasuries are reaching highs unseen since before the global financial crisis, with the government needing to issue ever more debt to cover the shortfall of revenues relative to spending. Japan, despite having the third largest economy in the world, is grappling with its own unique set of economic challenges. Tokyo, the country's capital and economic powerhouse, has experienced a state of emergency due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This has significantly impacted the economic activity and momentum in the city. The inflation rate in Japan has been in negative terrain, a stark contrast to the inflation trends seen in other major economies. This deflationary situation has prompted the central bank to sustain prolonged easing. In layman's terms, the central bank is keeping the cost of borrowing money low in an attempt to stimulate economic growth and get inflation back on track. The government's immunization rollout has been slower than anticipated, with only a small fraction of the population having received their first dose. This slow pace has not only affected the health of the citizens, but also added uncertainty to the economic recovery path. Adding to these economic challenges is the political uncertainty. The leadership of Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga has come under scrutiny, creating an environment of instability that could potentially hinder the implementation of tough reforms necessary for Japan's economic revival. Now, let's turn our attention to the impact of global events on Japan's economy. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has had far-reaching effects, including a surge in Japan's import costs of fossil fuels. Japan, heavily reliant on fossil fuels following the shutdown of nuclear reactors in the wake of the 2011 tsunami, is feeling the pinch of these increased costs. The crisis has also led to a sharp depreciation of Japan's currency, adding another layer of complexity to the economic situation. However, every cloud has a silver lining. The natural gas crunch and the ongoing crisis have pushed the government to consider reopening nuclear plants, thereby reducing dependence on imported fossil fuels. While Japan's economy faces numerous hurdles, the crisis in Ukraine has presented a unique opportunity for the government to address these challenges and reduce dependence on imports. So, what does all this mean for the global economy? Well, we've seen how the rise of inflation in the United States has led to a surge in the Dow Jones S&P 500 and the Nasdaq Composite. With this uptick in Treasury yields and the strengthening of the dollar, the world's largest economy is showing solid signs of recovery from the pandemic recession. On the other hand, in Tokyo, the situation is a bit more complex. The ongoing issues with the pandemic, political instability, and the impacts of the Russian invasion of Ukraine are causing economic stress. Yet, amidst these challenges, there are also opportunities. The energy crisis, for instance, is pushing Japan to reduce its dependence on imports by reopening nuclear plants. Now you might wonder, how does this all connect? Well, these two economic situations, though playing out in different parts of the world, are inextricably linked through the global economy. The recovery in the United States could boost global markets, while the issues in Tokyo could have the opposite effect. So it's crucial to keep in mind that our global economy is an intricate web, where changes in one part can ripple through the whole system. As we've seen, the economic ripples created by inflation in the US and the situation in Tokyo can be felt across the globe, underscoring the intricate web that is the global economy.